It is the 4th of March and time for another edition of Wednesday with Walton and Reis here at the Cardinal Nation. I'm Brian Walton and here's my partner Kyle Reis. Welcome,
Hello,
Kyle.
Brian. Brian, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. It's a good thing we didn't have the recording rolling for the last 15 minutes as Kyle and I had a wide-ranging discussion about lots of things. But we'll have another 30 to 45 minutes here where we'll talk about all the news going on in the Cardinal world, Major League and minor league. Of course, we come to you each week via thecardinalnation.com. Where you can catch a video stream, or on any of the podcast apps that are out there. You can either get us on audio or video, hopefully not both. So, and it's posted, by the way. I usually have the podcast ready to go by 6 a.m. each morning. I may not publicize it that fast on the website, but those of you who know where it is and subscribe to it, you can get it. And I've worked very hard to make sure that it's available first thing in the morning because I know a lot of folks like to listen when they drive in their cars to work. So,
Yeah,
follow
Brian,
us.
I've gotten incredible feedback about that. Just a quick aside, thank you so much for doing it because the feedback people in my DMs and otherwise have been really positive about that. So thank you for doing it.
Well, I thank you to you because we record this early enough on Tuesday night that I can get it prepped and all set to go. And Kyle and I obviously have to work behind the scenes on our various schedules. I got back from the ballpark. Kyle got back from his job, and we've found time to get this recorded. In the news this week, certainly the big piece of news is the contract extension for Oliver Marmol. 2 more years. This was his last year of his contract, so he technically was a lame duck. Although, Chaim Bloom pretty much signaled that this was going to happen. Of course, we thought that was going to happen with Mike Shilden instead of the news conference being already, he left the organization. So you never know until it happens. But Oliver Marmol's back for 2027 and 2028 with an option for 2029. There's some folks that are upset about that, Kyle. Are you one of them?
I am not, Brian. My whole premise all along the lines with the Marmol extension is if you're going to bring him, if you're going to start the 2026 season with Oliver Marmol as your manager, as you start this build, then you should do that. You should just go ahead and commit to that for at least 2027, especially because, you don't know what's going to happen between the 2026 season and 2027 season with labor negotiations. But yeah, it just makes sense to me that if you are as committed to bringing him and letting him be the coach for the first step, or maybe the second step, depending on how you want to look at it, of this rebuilding of the franchise, then you might as well extend him. And by the way, it's also not hard if it's not going to plan halfway through next year to pivot to someone else. So, it costs a little extra money, of course. But no, look, I like it. I think he's a fine manager. Brian, I've lived under the premise for a long time that all managers are bad. Some of them are just luckier and have better talent than the others. I say that as someone who managed little leaguers, and I was terrible at it. And maybe I'm just doing some projecting, but that's my thought. And I think
You and Jim Hayes have something in common.
that's it. Yeah, yeah. Except for I'm sure he's better, and he actually had a son on the team. I was just that weirdo coaching a bunch of kids. But so I think Oliver Marmol has matured quite a bit from the outside perspective over the last couple of years, and I think that that's good for the players to see. I think that he's liked in the clubhouse. I think that the young players respond to him, and all that's positive for the position the Cardinals are in right now. Brian, do you echo those sentiments? How are you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I look at the Cardinals team and say, if the best manager in the history of the game was available, would this team be a playoff contender? And the answer is no. You might as well have a young guy that can teach and work with young players, and that's Marmol, just like Mike Schilt before him, came up through the organization as a teacher, and I kind of look at it like the Rich Renteria situation in Chicago, where the Cubs were, of course, they did their tanking and were rebuilding up, and they got the experienced manager to hold down the fort. And then when they got good, they decided, all right, we're going to get Joe Madden, get the marquee guy, and they won a World Series. I don't know, they might have won a World Series with Renteria there, but I think Marmol's going to be here. This contract will sort of coincide, 2029 being the question, maybe kind of coincide with this down period, maybe. And if they're coming up and they're showing progress, maybe Marmol stays around. I can't remember who it was. One of the national writers, one of the national scribes, I think it was Jim Bowden, said, I think Oliver Marmol is going to be the manager for the Cardinals for the next 10 years. And he might be right if the Cardinals, improve while Ollie's still under contract. And we know the Cardinals don't like to eat money, so it's not like they're going to necessarily fire him early. I think part of some of the fan concern is related to Yadier Molina, and the fact that Yadier Molina is back in the fold, and he was the first week especially, he was very visible in camp. I haven't seen him as much since, but Yadier Molina's not ready to manage a major league team, and maybe down the road he will be. Don't know, but I think Marmol's the guy for the job right now.
Yeah, Brian, and it's going to be interesting. I understand why people want Yachty and are really interested in the idea of Yachty being the next Cardinals manager, whenever that is. What I'm anxious to see is what Yachty's role is once he gets back from the World Baseball Classic, right? Because he's helping with the Puerto Rican team in the World Baseball Classic. I'm anxious to see if he is as prevalent at camp now that there's been a break, or if he goes back to Puerto Rico and goes home and it's not the same thing for him, and then where it goes from that. So, look, again, I maintain that if Yadier Molina looks like he's ready to be a manager at the major league level with all of the concerns that we have that aren't on the field related, that and the Cardinals think that he's the right guy, they're going to do it. They're going to pivot to him, regardless of what the contract is for Oliver Marmol. This is just one thing you don't have to worry about in the near or in the near future, and you can adjust accordingly. So I'm with you there, Brian.
Interesting piece of inside information. I just learned this today in a side conversation with a coach. Um, Yachty's base in the U.S. had been the Jupiter area, logically so. He's now apparently with a bunch of major leaguers in Austin, Texas. I didn't know that. I haven't confirmed it, but the person who told me should know because he also lives there. So that's kind of interesting too that Yachty's not in Jupiter, although obviously he can travel anywhere. But yes, I agree with you. Let's see what happens after WBC's over and what kind of role he plays.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
All right, so another piece of news: the Cardinals, had a day off on Tuesday, and as customary, the day before that happens, they make some roster cuts, and they did that after Monday's game with the team off on Tuesday. They cut 11 players. Most of them are, I think, 9 of them were pitchers. 5 of them are prospects, so it was prospect guys. But there's nobody with a lot of AAA experience other than Mike Antico, I guess,
Yeah.
and Zach Thompson, who's injured. So these were guys that aren't going to, weren't going to make the St. Louis club anyway. I'm talking about Roby and Senja, Pete Hansen, Ishan Henderson, who's also injured. We're favorite Austin Love, Hansel Racone, Sam Robertson, Jared Schuster, and then catcher Grayson Tarlow as well. So any thoughts about that first cut?
No, no, I think that all makes a lot of sense. We know that both Hansen and Henderson are down on the IL. Or they're throwing. What I mean is their throwing program is kind of off kilter right now for various reasons. And you look at the other list, and same thing with Takora Roby, Robersa, Thompson, all those guys, like you said. I would say maybe if you were getting picky about, or if you were trying too hard to make a comment here, Jared Schuster might be the one where you say, "Oh, that's kind of a surprise," but we haven't really seen him, and we just and now that it's not like they're replacing Jojo Romero. Jojo is still
No,
here, so it's
no.
not as much of a surprise because
Yeah,
of
the
that.
whole trade Jojo Romero thing. I know some people are trying to keep that body alive, but I haven't heard a peep about that in weeks, and I don't think it's real. At this point, until somebody makes another roster cut and cuts somebody interesting, I think I think the Cardinals are where they are.
Yeah, I agree with you, but yeah, the first round of cuts make a lot of sense, and maybe when we get to watch Cardinal baseball again, we'll get to see some of these guys in action.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious about left field. It's interesting. With Nathan Church here, he hasn't played there. I guess they want to see other guys. I guess they know Nathan Church can play left field, but they've been auditioning the infielders and as well as Nelson Velasquez, who of course they brought in. So I guess we'll see how that plays out, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, Brian. The thing about being so left-handed heavy, or I guess they're not that left-handed heavy so much at the plate, but I know that they were so singularly focused on bringing in a right-handed bat for an outfield position. So I think that that's just what this is, trying to get as many right-handed bats at bats in spring and reps in the outfield to see who best suits that corner outfield right-handed bat platoon player time in the long run. That's what I think. You nailed it. Nathan Church. They know what Nathan Church is. They know what his defense is going to do, and it's not as much of a concern right now.
Yeah, yeah.
The better question, Brian, is we've talked about those that group of infielders, Urias and Sajasi and Fermin and Prieto. Sajasi's going to be on Tuesday night playing is short batting ninth, I think, playing shortstop for
Team
Team
Italy.
Italy. Yeah. So I guess what I'm anxious to see again once we get to watch Cardinal baseball again and not just doing stat line scouting, I'm anxious to see how that group of utility players is helping to differentiate themselves from Nelson Velasquez and maybe our Jose Fermin in particular is carving out the opportunity to play a corner outfield position for himself. So yeah, Nathan Church of it all aside, I'm just anxious to see this position battle, this utility position battle, crank up in camp a little bit.
Yeah, and there was a lot of speculation over the winter, or at least some speculation over the winter that Church would be coming into camp to challenge Victor Scott in center, and there's zero indication that that's the case. I mean, they've talked up and down and left and right about Victor Scott and the commitment he's made, and I just don't see that as a battle at all.
Yeah, not one peep out of that, Brian. Not one peep. And I'm again, I would say that December me is surprised by that, but knowing what we've known and learned since winter warm up, again, the writing on for that was on the wall.
Yep. One other piece of news that's interesting, a couple pieces. Dustin May's going to finally make his first start. Saw him throw a sim game at the end of last week, and he wasn't super sharp. It didn't look like it to me. The other piece of news is that Ivan Herrera has started, now played behind the plate, still relatively early in camp. But it was interesting to see him make a start. I think that was on Monday's game.
Yeah, and man, he caught and Kyle Leahy let up a home run. He's not a catcher, Brian. He's not a catcher.
Yeah,
No,
what's his catcher ERA now? It's probably 9.
yeah, yeah. No, of course, for the people who can't see me on the YouTube site, I mean that very jokingly. I'm excited. I'm glad that we're this early in camp that we're getting to see Ivan behind the plate. That gets me really, really, really fired up. So, yeah,
What's going to give
I
him
would,
some? It's going to give him some more roster flexibility. If Herrera has to be the full-time DH, that limits Marmol's, ability to get some other guys in the lineup.
yeah. And again, I'm one of these people who believe that the best thing for the long-term health of the St. Louis Cardinals is for Ivan Herrera to be a really good catcher, not a really good DH or a really good first baseman or a really good outfielder. To be a really good catcher, whether that be, an average defensive catcher with his offensive abilities or whatever it might look like. I think that could be the big difference between what track and how quickly the Cardinals track down that track they get to the permanent the fruition of their build.
All right. So now on the minor league side, those 11 cuts from Major League Camp meant that the minor league camp now is 154 players. 154 players right now, and they're competing for, I don't know, 116 jobs, something like that, for the full season team. So what we're seeing this year, other than so many coaches, like 51 coaches on the minor league side. I saw a catching drill today where there were 5 coaches and 2 catchers.
Wow.
I mean, they're getting a lot and they're working on detail, not minute detail, but they're working on a lot of detail, situational leads with certain outs and certain. I mean, there's not a minute where there isn't something where these players aren't doing something, and that's great. There's not a lot of standing around or waiting, and it seems like hopefully they'll be better fundamentally this year than they've ever been before. Now, today was a sim game, the first simulated game of spring, and there were some defensive lapses, as you think there might be early. But there were also a lot of long balls. Some of it was because the wind was blowing out, but a couple of the balls that were hit, or 2 or 3 of them, were no doubt about it anywhere at any time. So we'll talk about that briefly as well. So they created 2 teams, and they have working rosters for Palm Beach, Peoria, Springfield, Memphis, but with so many players still in Major League Camp, you can't really go by that, but you can kind of see which players are in which group. And I post those every day at the Cardinal Nation, along with which players are throwing bullpens and how many innings they're throwing, because by seeing who's throwing multiple innings, that tells you who's being stretched out as a starter, or and maybe either who's not, or maybe they're behind. So that's information you can get if you subscribe. So these 2 lineups today, they just call them the home and away team. And a lot of prospects in the lineup. They had 4 pitchers, each pitch 3 innings. So the idea was it was a 6-inning sim game. And what a sim game is there were umpires. There were 2 umpires working the game. But if you wanted to roll an inning, if a pitcher got to his 30 or 35 pitches in an inning, the manager could say roll the inning. And even though there weren't 3 outs, they could go off the field. The other side of that works as well, and that is if the pitcher gets 3 quick outs and they want him to get some more pitches, they'll say stay out there, and the pitcher will have to get 4 or 5 outs. And I'll tell you about in a little bit where one of the pitchers got burned by that rule.
Hmm.
So the 4 pitchers that threw today were Mason Molina and Nate Dome, who were 2 of the acquisitions at the deadline last year. and then Chen Wei Lin and Blake Aida, who's another one of the um, uh, trade acquisitions. And the sim game, the 6 inning sim game ended up 7-4. And of those 11 runs, all of them were scored on home runs.
Ha,
Kind of unusual.
ha.
Um, in the second inning, with when Mason Molina was pitching, there were a couple of defensive gaffes. One where shortstop Jesus Baez and third baseman Jalen Flores, who, by the way, I keep saying this, is a tall drink of water.
Yeah.
Um, they had a confusion on a pop up and it didn't get caught. And then Ty Pete dropped the ball in deep center that Juan Bin Cho hit. So now there are two runners on base. Ian Petrutz hits a double down the line, but Blake Madras, who reached base the first time, was out by a mile at home. So now there's still two runners on, and Rainiel Rodriguez came up against Mason Molina, and he hit a ball off the performance. They're playing on field one, so that's where the major leaguers used to do a lot of their work. He hit a
Mhm.
ball off the new performance building beyond the left field fence, and the ball bounced off the wall and back onto the field. Just a mammoth blast to right. Now the wind was blowing out there, but I mean it was an impressive shot by Rainiel Rodriguez.
Well, Brian, there's so much to chew on there. That's really interesting. Between, this will be one of those when you tease this podcast, all you have to do is say, uh, something about a ball that Rainiel hit that you won't believe, and that'll be enough to get people's attention.
Yeah.
It's fun with Mason Molina because Mason Molina has made a lot of noise to the Cardinal brass, but also to fans who track the data because his velocity was up in his one in-game spring training appearance. He had a breaking pitch that looked sharper to go with the changeup that has been his calling card, and it has both the Cardinals and fans pretty excited about it. Of course, there's no accounting for the left side of the infield dropping a pop up and Ty Pete, screwing around out there with the wind in center.
Yeah, he
But
would have been out, he would have been out of the inning with good defense behind him.
that's it, and it goes to show you just how important defense is. Sometimes we lose track of that. Sometimes I'm a bad culprit of that. Honestly, I lose track of how important defense is. But he gets out of that inning; it's not a big deal. But the fun part of that is that you got to see Rainiel Rodriguez take the life of a baseball, and that's
Yeah, it
cool.
was pretty impressive. I haven't gone through my photos from the day yet to see if I have a picture of it. I'm pretty sure I do, and I'll. That's the other thing subscribers to Cardinal Nation get. I post 3 or 4 dozen photos every day of of some of the things that happened, on the field. So take a look. Now the next inning, Molina was back again, and Madras hit a solo home run to right center. So he was down 4-0 at that point. And then in the fourth inning was where the pitchers switched over, and Blake Aida was pitching in relief of Chen Wei Lin, and he was wild. I don't know, maybe there was a lot of attention there. A lot of coaches, all the minor league players were, other than the ones in the game, were all watching this. And he was, he threw under the screen, had trouble throwing strikes. He hit Jesus Baez with a pitch on the left shoulder, and then there was a crazy defensive thing where Baez tried to steal second, and the throw wasn't good, and he tried to take third but got thrown out. Well, as a result, the bases were empty when Cade McGee came up, and Cade McGee hit a home run to deep left center. I mean, it
Mhm.
was again another no doubt about it, and it could have been a 2-run shot, but the bases were empty. But I heard one of the coaches say offhand, basically, has there been a single day in this camp where Cade McGee hasn't hit at least one ball hard? And if folks remember, Cade McGee got off to a tremendous start last year, first month or so, and then he cooled off. But he's apparently impressing here in camp.
You took the words out of my mouth, Brian. You nailed it. The amount of chatter I've heard about Cade McGee, both the major league camp and the minor league camp, have been really impressed with some of the strides that he made. Brian, famously last year we were talking about Josh Cross and Cade McGee as maybe being two of the more important prospects early on in the season because of what it meant for the depth of the Cardinals prospects. And to hear that this incredibly talented defensive third baseman with really raw power, which was his calling card in Cincinnati, at the University of Cincinnati, is starting to put it together early in camp. That has me excited. It's funny. It feels like he might be a prospect worth keeping a close eye on, and that's really good. Now, of course, on the opposite side, you nailed it. What have we been talking about with Shen Wei Len this whole time, Brian? He throws hard. Sure, his his off speed, his breaking pitch, his well, specifically his splitter and his changeup are good, but his command has never been good, and his fastball, as fast as it is, doesn't really have a whole lot of movement, and his slider's kind of weak because of it too. So these are things that we need to see continue to grow along the lines.
Yeah, and Lynn threw 3 scoreless innings, so to his credit
Yeah,
today.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Um, by the way, Cade McGee was playing second base today, interestingly. So, while he's a talented third baseman, apparently they're giving him an opportunity to diversify himself as well. So he's was at second base.
Yeah, you mentioned too. Jalen Flores was playing third, and Jesus Baez was at short. And
Yes.
obviously, the roles should be reversed in the season because Flores is a superior defensive shortstop to Baez in every conceivable way. But it's nice to see that they're all getting moved around and getting reps all over the place.
And Baez is, what he is, very aggressive swinger. I talked about him being aggressive on the bases, getting thrown out at third when he didn't need to be. Um, but he's obviously got a lot of talent too. Another guy who moved across the diamond, Jack Gurovich, who has been a first baseman since he was drafted, played third base, came in and relieved Daniel Ortiz at third base for the away team. So that's another guy who's getting some additional experience at another position.
Such great info. And there was always a rumor too he might find some time out in the corner outfield too at some point. So again, give me all the utility. I like the fact that they're giving these guys a chance to be appraised at different positions, and give them a chance to show their athleticism even with bigger bodies. So I'm on board with it. I love it.
And speaking of that, Ryan Mitchell, who I've reported has saw some time at shortstop, saw some time at second base, still a center fielder, played in the game in center field. And I asked one of the coaches because I was away on assignment for the
Ah,
weekend, and I asked kind of, hey, what did I miss? I didn't miss anything on Sunday because they weren't there. But um, one of the coaches told me that in a sim game, Mitchell hit a ball out of field five, hit another one hopper off the fence, and then walked. And so they're very happy with Ryan Mitchell at the plate. They're happy with his maturity, but I think finding him a defensive home is something that is still a work in progress. But we're talking about a teenager here.
yeah, I could be critical of Ryan Mitchell a little bit. But he's got the approach where there's no reason to think he couldn't blow through the lowest levels of the minors without batting an eye just at the plate. I'm anxious to see how that all develops, and I'm glad he's having some early success. That's really positive. God, I can't, Brian. This is just tremendous information that you're relaying to the audience.
Well, hey, subscribe. I'm sorry, it sounds like a commercial, but it is. You get the full detail. I'm gonna document, what happened every at bat during the game, so people can see. I don't know. I won't be able to do that once multiple teams are playing because they can't be in multiple places at a time. But I'll pick a game and stay with it. Um, Nate Dome came in, and in the fifth inning, he fanned the side, all
Oh
looking,
wow.
all looking. John Gazdar, Daniel Ortiz, and Ryan Weingartner. Very impressive inning. Very impressive inning.
Well, good. I
Don't
like to hear
don't
that.
don't look good today.
When the Cardinals acquired him, I was a big fan of him out of college. So it's nice to hear he's having some success, especially after being shut down a little early at the end of the 2025 season. I do think, what his calling card in college was his slider, and I know that he takes great pride in his slider. I know his fastball is an interesting pitch, and the changeup is a pitch that might be better than I'm giving it credit for. But again, command is kind of an issue. So yeah, that's terrific news, Brian. Another great little tidbit.
On the other side of the coin, Blake Aida, we talked about him giving up that McGee home run in the fourth. In the fifth inning, a couple of singles and an error, and Ty Pete came to the plate. And Mr. Pete looks like a heck of a ball player. Haven't seen enough of him yet, but in this particular at bat, he crushed a grand slam to dead
Wow,
center.
wow.
Yeah, yeah. And so now that was, four more runs against Blake Aida, although you could argue, one of them was an error, but it was at that point in time it was no outs. Um,
Poor
and
Blake
then
Aida. Sounds like he had a rough day.
yeah, well, and he pitched the sixth inning, and even though the home team was ahead, they still played that half inning. So Aida came back out, and with one on, Kenley Hunter hit a 2-run home run to left that ended the game. They stopped the game right there. At that point in time, that was the fifth home run of the day. And Kenley Hunter, of course, is a very interesting young infielder that's just cutting his teeth in rookie ball.
Yeah, that's impressive and that's positive to hear because he kind of has a reputation of being a little bit more of a slap hitter than anything else. They talked about him getting bigger and stronger and working on his mechanics a little bit. So it's nice to hear that well, I mean, it sucks for Blake Aida, but it's nice to hear that maybe there's some power blooming on the backfields at the very least.
Yeah, yeah. So that's kind of a thumbnail of what I saw today in the backfields. Um, the other topic that we wanted to cover, this is an article that I kind of had in the can for a while, and I rolled it out over the weekend when I was traveling. And it was a lot of folks are probably aware that the Cardinals have 6 picks in the top 86 spots in the draft in 2026. And it led me to wonder what kind of context is that? Is that the most? Is that the second most? How often have they had at least 6 in the top 86? So I went back to all the DeWitt ownership years to the mid 1990s. And in that time, they've only had 2 other years where they had that many picks. And part of the reason that was the case was that they've given up a lot of draft picks, especially in the last 10 years, between the Houston hacking scandal and signing free agents Fowler and Holland and Contreras and Gray. They lost 23% of their picks in the last 10 years. 23 of their top 86 picks in the last 10 years. And that's a contributor to the decline in the Cardinal system. You lose that many early picks, and granted, not all of them could be controlled. You certainly, the Houston hacking thing was not anything that was under anybody's control other than Chris Correa, but still it hurt the Cardinals.
Yeah, Brian. Again, important context there. But I love what you did here. This is the kind of stuff that really gets me going, and not only because of the historical aspect of it, but because it gives us a chance to take a second to talk about a gentleman named Mark McCormick and another gentleman named Tyler Heron and another gentleman named Josh Wilson. Like, man, you talk about fun blasts from the past names in there. That like and then also when you talk about those two drafts, 05 draft, which is where those names came from, Tyler Green, Colby Rasmus, then you can pivot to 2012, the other year where you have Waka and Wisdom and Kelly, and
And
it's
Stephen
just
Piscotty.
and Piscotty. So it's
all in the
really
first
interesting.
all in the first 86 picks. I mean,
Yeah,
and with the exception of Piscotty, I think they're all still in the major leagues. And we're talking about a draft that was 14 years ago.
yeah. I wasn't even born yet, Brian. Um,
Not quite, Kyle.
Sorry, I don't think I'm doing the math right there, but
No.
no, I remember when they drafted Michael Waka. I remember where I was. I remember being fired up about it because I love that changeup of his. But no, like I love that. It's so interesting. I probably should pull it up because it's also interesting context going over the names that the Tampa Bay Rays drafted. The 11 draft picks that they had in the top 100 or whatever it was a couple years back when Chaim Bloom was a part of that, and really it was just Blake Snell and his 10 or his 11 group of merry men.
Yeah, it wasn't
Uh,
it wasn't much. And Heim will joke about it. I mean, I'm sure he grimaces when he jokes about it, but he's actually joked about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's again, I love it because I think it gives you really great perspective on what these drafts can be, how exciting it is to have so many draft picks so early on. And I also think it gives really good comparative context on really what you're talking about as far as a value within a draft, right? Because like even the '05 draft, right? You had Colby Rasmus was 28th overall, Tyler Green was 30th overall. And then, your next four guys were never made a major league debut. But that is still, even though Tyler Green was a negative WAR player, that is still pretty tremendous value to get out of those picks. And then you go to 2012, and what do you have? You got Waka, James Ramsey, Stephen Piscotty, Patrick Wisdom, and then I know there was somebody else in there who I can't remember, but Stephen Piscotty was, or Patrick Wisdom was the last one, and it's like, or Carson Kelly was the last one in that group, and that's just such a really like that's how this also could go. Sure, you might not have like one incredible standout, but like you said, here you are 14 years later, and three of these guys are still in the league as contributors. One of them, and Carson Kelly, got better when he got into his 30s. Like
I
it's
drafted Carson Kelly in a fantasy league this last weekend. Second catch, but
yes,
I drafted Carson Kelly. I thought, oh, it's kind of like old times.
yeah, yeah. So I'm really glad we got a chance to talk about this, not only because I think it's a fantastic article and a great point of context, and I love bringing up the weird names that we don't talk about all that often because they fizzled out. But I also think it gives good perspective, really, on what a draft pick value is and what you might get out of a draft pick. and also, what it might look like down the line. Because sometimes we get so focused on the early picks and we expect the second rounder to be something and the third rounder to be something. And, it doesn't always work out that way, but the value distribution is very important. And it's hard to build that, but it's nice when it happens.
And just another couple of context points. In the last decade, which coincides with Randy Flores' time as a scouting director, only twice did the Cardinals have as many as 4 top 86 selections, and never 5, let alone 6. So this is a tremendous opportunity for Randy Flores and Zach Mortimer, the new head of amateur scouting underneath Randy, and the scouting team, to see what they can do with him. But in addition, the Cardinals have as many first top 86 picks, 6, as the last 3 years combined. So 2023, 2024, 2025, they only had 6 top 86 all 3 years. So they can basically make up 3 years, the 3 years worth of early picks in this one draft if they can get it right.
Brian, what a beautiful, smart way of putting that. That should get all Cardinal fans fired up, especially with some of the strides that, like you said, both the scouting and the development paths and groups seem to be making and adjusting to. So I'm excited about what we might see in the first couple rounds of the 2026 MLB draft.
And we'll be talking about the draft a lot more in the next 3 months. There's still, 3+ months until almost 4 months until the draft is held. The month after the College World Series will be held over the All-Star break, as it has been now the last couple of years. And
Mm-hmm.
it'll be a very exciting time for the St. Louis Cardinals making all these early picks.
Yeah, and there'll be so much analysis out there, and I cannot wait to be a part of that with you and to talk it over with you, Brian.
All right. Well, I think that'll conclude our March 4th edition of Wednesday with Walton Reis. Kyle, do you have anything else you want to cover?
No, Brian, I think we covered all the hot topics, and the next time I see you, we'll talk about what we saw in actual games. Other than
Yeah,
your
and what Kyle's alluding to, of course, is this donut hole in the schedule. Now, we're very happy that they figured out how Cardinals TV, sponsored by Bets 365, to get us some spring games. But there's this period, and I'm sure you all, as fans, know that you haven't been able to see the big league team on TV for a while, and that's going to change here in the next upcoming games. That's what Kyle was alluding to.
Yeah, I was being very clever and being very whiny, Brian. Thank you.
Well, you notice I slipped that product endorsement in, hoping that they'll throw a few coins our way, because while I don't have any sponsors now, I can always be bribed. So
We're proud to be bribed. I'll be bribed by anybody. Bet 365, DraftKings. Did I ever tell you how much I love you? Oh, I love your product. I've never placed a bet in my life, but you know what? You're the products that I
but if
love.
you were, there's where you'd go.
That's right. Exactly.
Hey, everybody, thanks again for joining us for this edition. And please keep coming back every Wednesday. We promise you we will, like it or not.
Yeah. Sorry.
Bye.